everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today and the next couple videos are going to be of a slightly different subject matter than archaeology because I made myself an 18th century gown and I want to talk about it. And the whole process and everything that was involved in making it for you guys, I thought that this would be an interesting subject. If you're really keen to watch some content about archaeology and having a career as an archaeologist, please check out any of my other videos on my channel. But if you're interested in costume, historical dress, sewing, etc., please stay tuned. This is going to be a series of videos of me making this dress because there are actually several parts to it. And I originally wanted to do one, but then when I was writing down my outline, it was like going to be absolutely huge. So I decided to actually divvy up the videos into a couple different smaller segments. Spoiler alert, the actual dress itself and me in it will be in the very last video in the series, which is going to come up in a couple weeks. Today is just going to be an introduction to the project. And then next we're going to cover kind of the undergarments, so the making of the panniers and the stays / corset. After that, we'll talk about the making of like the underskirt and the actual gown itself. And then the last video will be about beauty and accessories. How I did my lovely hair, a little bit of the 18th century makeup that I have, which is like really heavy on the blush. That's why that's there. And then the accessories. And then, like I said, the last video will have me in the dress, walking around in it with the hair, the makeup, everything. But you will see the rest of it and all the pieces in these videos. I don't actually have any sewing footage because I didn't think that far ahead when I started this project. I am a completely beginner seamstress. For about 2 years ago, I had never used a sewing machine before. I never took the class in high school, etc. So I completely picked this up and then learned a lot of stuff along the way and made quite a few mistakes that hopefully by talking about, maybe if you're thinking of doing a project like this, now you can avoid them because I've already done them for you. The biggest question you might be asking right now is, why did you decide to do this? Well, I wanted to. I've always been fascinated by the like Rococo, Baroque fashion throughout my entire life. I really like the idea of, for some reason, of being strung into a corset and having to go through a door sideways. And I've always wanted to obviously have one of those dresses and to wear them whenever I want, but it's very expensive to buy. I would say kind of the first inkling I had that I could maybe do a project like this was when I actually used to work at a costume rental store, and the person who owned it, she was like a master level cosplay seamstress, and she had made fantastical creations. And one of her pieces that she made was this pink giant hooped gown, like Marie Antoinette style gown, and that was for rent at the store. And when I worked there on Halloween, she would let the staff pick costumes to wear around the store. As soon as she said that, I was like, I want to wear the Marie Antoinette dress. And so she let me. It was only one day and I could only kind of sidle side to side behind the cash register, but I got to wear like a big white wig, and I also got to wear like a leather mask that we had on sale, so I looked like I was actually going to the ball. And it was an amazing experience and I loved it, and that kind of got me hooked. And then we fast forward like 10 years to the year before my 30th birthday. I turned 29 and I thought to myself, I want to make a 30 before 30 list. What's something I've always wanted? I've always wanted one of these big dresses. The 30 before 30 list never actually got finished, but that's beside the point because the dress got finished. I had recently started watching Karolina Zabrowska, apologies if I didn't say that correctly, on YouTube. She is a great historical costumer, but she spoke in one of her videos about how she got started and how, you know, it's not that difficult. You know, she learned how to do it not knowing anything before, and she's made herself now all these fantastical things. And I kind of thought, well, I can do it then, right? And so my thinking was, at the end of this process, I would have a big, nice gown that I can wear to costume parties, or maybe the Fête Galante at Versailles, which would be like my dream of being able to do, but we'll see if that ever actually happens. And also at the same time, I would be learning the technical skill of sewing, which I think would be a really valuable thing to just have in general, because I mean, making your clothes, being able to fit you better, being able to fix your clothes, or even being able to make your own clothes is something I think would be a very useful skill to have. I initially wanted to start this project doing it all myself, which was stupid. Not saying that you can't learn sewing from scratch if you really try, but I made quite a few mistakes which I will talk about before I started the project. And then while I was kind of in the middle of the planning stage, and then conveniently nearby a fabric store started doing sewing classes that I could get into. So there's actually quite a funny story on how I joined the sewing class. I had gone into the store to buy fabric and I'd been put on a list for it, and then I got the call that there was a space open, and I had a chance to speak to the teacher about the class and what was expected. And she said, this is kind of how the structure is, this is how it works. You know, you can make any project that you want and I'll help you make it. My only rule is that you can't make your wedding dress. And in my mind, I kind of went, challenge accepted, because what's the next most difficult thing that you can make? An 18th century ball gown. So I've had quite a laugh about that with my teacher afterwards. I don't know if I would have been able to get into the class if she had realized what exactly I was going to put her through in terms of the dress. This was a very basic beginner class, so the way it generally worked was that you made, I think, a bag, then a skirt, and then you could pick your own project to then go from once you had the basics down, and the teacher would help you. Because I already had practiced on my own personal sewing machine and I knew how to like do a straight line and backstitch, I didn't have to make the bag, but I did make myself a skirt. Actually, it's this skirt, which considering my outfit and this skirt and the later on dress, you'd think that I'd really have a thing for pink, which actually isn't true. I don't, but it seems like I have a lot in this video. But yeah, so I made this just basic pencil skirt as my first project, which probably looks quite good from far away, but don't look at it close up because it's not that great. I am not going for a completely historically accurate dress. That was my initial thought that I wanted to do, but the longer I looked into it, the more difficult that was going to be. And I obviously have never done draping before, I've never done pattern making before, and I didn't want to also have a really expensive project, so I ended up going for a less expensive costume pattern for both the stays, the gown itself. I also haven't gone for completely period accurate fabric. I am using a sewing machine and not sewing it by hand. So I've done a lot of shortcuts to get to where I am. So just going to warn anybody who's thinking I'm making something completely accurate, it's not. There is a zipper in the back of my dress. The order in which I decided to make things, I kind of scaled up for difficulty. So I started with what I thought was the easiest part of the project, which was the panniers, and then I did the underskirt, and once I had those two done, I decided to do the stays, partially because I needed to know how they changed my shape in order to make the rest of the gown off that, so that it wasn't going to end up being too big, because as you may know, stays, they tend to make you a little bit smaller and they're a different shape than what your body normally is. I was also originally going to make a shift to wear under this, which is of course period accurate, but I got too lazy and I was getting a bit fed up by the time that I got to the end of this project. I just ended up, like when I filmed today in my dress outdoors, I just ended up wearing a white t-shirt underneath and I pinned it to my stays so that I got the proper neckline, but of course I made a mistake and I didn't do the back. So if you're really eagle-eyed in the final video, you'll be able to see my t-shirt at the back of my dress. So maybe I should make myself a shift now that I have a bunch more free time than I normally would. So I used two different patterns for this project. For the corset slash stays, I used the Butterick 4254, and on that I used this particular pattern. So it's a back lacing stay. I did think about doing the front lacing, but decided not to because I thought that this would be stiffer in the front, so it would give you a bit more structure to it. And then for the gown, I used the Simplicity 4092 pattern, which again, it's quite good. It's just, you know, it's a costume. One of my first mistakes that I made in this project was actually buying the wrong size of pattern. This is entirely my own fault and not my teacher's. My sewing skills were kind of all over the place when I came to her because I kind of knew how to do some stuff but not others. So I don't think she realized that I didn't know the difference between clothing size and sewing size. So for those of you that don't already know, the size of clothes that you wear normally is not the same as the size of patterns when you buy them. So if you're a size 10 in normal life, you're not a size 10 when you're buying a pattern. I didn't know that, so I bought all the patterns in my normal clothing size. Turns out I'm somewhere between two sizes, about 2 sizes up from what I normally did. So I had to actually buy the same 2 patterns another time over to make sure that I actually had them in the correct size. So that was really fun. So don't do that. I did most of my sewing at my class. I occasionally did bring stuff home and do it, but most of it was done there, partially because I was a beginner and I needed help reading patterns, understanding what they were saying, what I was supposed to be doing, what I did wrong when I screwed something up. Also, there's a lot more space there. She has an entire room for this. She has a big tabletop. My flat just doesn't have the floor or table space that I would need to be able to spread stuff out. She also has more equipment. So for example, she has a semi-industrial sewing machine that's a bit more powerful than the basic one that I have at home, which I definitely needed for my stays and a couple pieces of the gown. She obviously also has an overlocker. For those of you who are from America, that's what a serger is. And those of you who don't know what I mean by either of those 2 terms, if you look at any basic piece of clothing, let's see if I can get this to focus. If you look at this and you can see this line of stitching across the top here, this is to protect your seam from fraying. So fabric unravels and frays when it rubs against stuff. So you need to do something when you finish your piece to keep that from happening, because otherwise eventually it'll unravel and take your garment with it. So overlocking is one of the things to do to fix that. You need a special machine to do it. I don't have one at home. They are quite expensive. I wasn't gonna buy one from this project. My teacher has one. Obviously I needed to use that at her studio when I was finishing all my seams and whatnot. It was also just a nice atmosphere to be in. I made lots of new friends. Any of you are watching, thanks to my sewing class support from everyone who always thought that I had a very cool project that I was working on and always seemed suitably impressed and didn't outright call me a weird nerd. Overall, this project took me about 10 months. Started it in January 2019 and I finished it in October 2019. Now, keep in mind, there was a break in the summer when my classes weren't running that I couldn't work on it, and I also occasionally did have to take breaks and go do other things. So it's probably closer to 8 months of basically 2.5 hour blocks each week. Obviously, if you're more experienced with sewing or you have more time to do this, it'll take you a lot less time. So that's the end of this video. So we know the patterns that I'm doing, why I'm doing this project, the fact that it's not completely historically accurate. I'd like to say a big thank you to my sewing teacher, Serafina, who helped me through this entire process. I'm sure that this was a headache for you at times and who was just so great to learn from. As per usual, if you guys have any comments or questions for me, please put them down in the description box below. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more from me, check out any of my other videos on my channel. If you want to continue seeing more from me, press the subscribe button and the bell, and stay tuned for the next video in my series.